Hey guys, quick update video on NIO. NIO going global, question mark, as well as what happened on Friday. This video on a Sunday. I don't have much time to fancy cutting this, so I hope you guys don't mind. And let's jump into the rumors that are floating around. A couple of people have been sending me around the possible market entry of NIO in Europe starting next year. So if you have been following this channel, you know that I really like to, don't spread rumors around here, and I really see that there have been lots of rumors floating around, especially in Facebook groups, and NIO is getting much more excitement and traction recently. Of course, the stock price has helped with that, but there is lots of news out there which, in my point of view, isn't worth commenting on, especially if you look at the analyst ratings and the Yahoo Finance price targets for NIO and stuff like that. Honestly, people, I don't think you should be trading on that, and you shouldn't be spamming the Facebook groups with all of this in a hope to pumping the stock. My channel really is not about all of that, but I want to help you to kind of separate a little bit from what you can take for granted and what you can throw into the bin. So now we have a rumor about NIO possibly going overseas with a project called Marco Polo, while preparing the market entry into Europe. And we had such rumors earlier this year. I did a video also commenting on that back then. At that time, people were thrilled and excited that NIO is possibly going to start to sell their cars to Europe in September and October this year. And I basically said, guys, this is too early. The timeline doesn't make sense. NIO shouldn't do that. They will be overloading their activities and resources if they want to do that. And there's enough demand in China to cater. So my point of view back then, it didn't make sense that NIO goes global very fast. However, I also outlined that I do think that NIO will go global because I just see the big potential of NIO. That's a very appealing brand. We see lots of people are really excited about NIO stock, but also the car, even just from viewing them online. So I do think there is a really good target group in Europe, and also that the build quality of the car is really resonating well with the car buyers in Germany or Europe and anywhere else. So I do think NIO should go global. And now with these new rumors, there are kind of around NIO now preparing the market entry and going into Europe. Particularly, they're mentioning, I think, Norway or Scandinavian countries for the beginning. And I do think this time this is credible. So you can take this rumor for a fact. I do think in 2021, we will see NIO starting selling in Europe. And on top of that, I also think it's really likely that we will start it seeing in the Scandinavian country first. That's actually a similar approach to what Biden had in mind before they unfortunately went out of business. If you've followed what I've been doing back then, I've also been invited to cover Biden's Europe entry. They did a live session, also a Q&A kind of session with some executives on which we learned about their partnerships in Europe and so on. Well, that never took off. But it seems now that NIO is kind of stepping in the footsteps of Biden there, and also kind of copying the way and approach of Xiaopeng, which is actually already giving some cars to YouTubers here in Europe and trying them out, and also starting selling cars in Northern Europe. And so I do think, it's quite likely that NIO will start doing that also in Europe. It makes sense to go for the Scandinavian countries first because there is a high adoption of EVs in general. There's lots of purchasing power. And I do think that NIO's brand really fits quite nice in a small condensed market where you can make some observations in terms of consumer adoption and perception and how well everything goes, and then scaling from there. So I do think, yes, next year, by the mid of the year, we will see NIO cars being sold in Europe, in Scandinavia, and then expanding from there also to, more the central hub, maybe Germany here in Europe. So this is exciting news, right? We will finally see the NIOs here in Europe, and this is good. This should also be good for the demand. I mean, actually, we should expect small volumes in Europe first because they are supply constrained. I mean, China is pumping, the demand is really up, the delivery times are quite long, so don't expect a really big rollout in Europe. As I mentioned, it's kind of a pilot in a smaller market in my point of view, but still I'm personally excited because this will be possibly the first successful market entry of a Chinese brand in the West, in Europe, in terms of matching it with their Western competitors here. And I do think in NIO's terms, they have actually quite good chances of succeeding here. But there are still lots of open questions. For instance, will they start doing NIO houses in Europe? Will they bring battery swapping to Europe as well? And how do you actually bring a kind of digital native brand from China into Europe, which is kind of much more conservative, especially in the age group where people are buying cars here? So there are lots of localization questions that need to be solved, and I'm really looking forward to what will be the NIO approach there. But I think they will find the right answers, and obviously they should have a large crowd of investors and community here in Germany and in Europe and beyond to give the right answers to that. So the big question is always, will this pump NIO stock even further? And this is once again where I want to put a little warning out there. I think such kind of news is not necessarily a big signal for another spike in the stock price. Also, coming back to what has happened on Friday, and if you see my last two videos where I actually mentioned that we are going through a troublesome time, a big shift in the markets, and I personally mentioned how I sold off actually most of my US exposure. And well, what I said really happened on Friday. We saw this huge market pullback, so I'm quite happy that I managed to, well, I've been lucky here to time the markets in this regard. It's not possible to time the markets. Now the same here with this news about NIO going global. Yes, it's super big news, and I think we should all be happy about it, but this is not for granted that this has a positive implication on the stock price in the near-term future. And also we should be aware that next week, as I mentioned in my videos, this will be a super troublesome week. We had just announced that the UK is also going into a lockdown. We have the election coming up next week, and as pointed out, the election is also linked to the question whether or not the US will also follow France, Germany, Spain, Italy, and UK into a second lockdown. And we all have seen on Friday what the market is doing in regards to announced lockdowns. I mean, the stocks are tanking. So this will also have implications on NIO, as I outlined in my last video, despite the fact that I think that Chinese stocks are the future here, and they should be they should be benefiting, and also NIO should be one stock that is not tanking as much as its Western peers. Still, it may go down if the overall market is red. We saw it in Friday as well. So be careful. I see lots of messages out there of people maxing out their credit cards or taking on loans and trying to invest in NIO. I think this is a big red flag. I can only advise to not do anything like that, because if you're investing money that you don't really own, this is a recipe for disaster, and I don't want to have anything to do with that. And I think people should not think that NIO is a money printing machine for them. Although we had a really nice run upwards, I think stock prices cannot flee the reality here. And if we have really troublesome times now in the markets with the elections and the COVID situation, then you cannot just bet on NIO stock going even higher and further just like that. On the other hand, as I'm always teaching, I don't think you should try and time the markets here and sell off NIO. Some people got me wrong. I didn't sell off one single share of NIO. I would never do that because I expect even if NIO is going down, that the share price will recover to today's levels once again. And I'm not trying to sell the peak now, pay some taxes on the gains, and then trying buying it cheaper. I saw way too many people from $3 up to now $30 who tried to do that, and with each of the spikes they wanted to sell and then come back in cheaper. Most of them we have lost along the journey. They never came back. So I wouldn't say that this is a good strategy, but this is just personally how I'm doing it. I'm not looking to sell any NIO stock. But as a feedback on my last videos, I got many questions like where I'm investing. Actually, I mentioned some of the stocks that I'm investing in. I mentioned that I'm going into Bitcoin as well. I did exactly do that on Friday already. I still kept some cash for next week in case that it tanks even further, because I do think the overall situation here is that it may not be the second crash, even if the elections have terrible outcomes, or even if we go into a second lockdown in the US. I do think the overall situation still is that we have zero interest rates and so on, that the stock market will recover and will go on, because this is just the environment as I see it. However, I do think we will see a big shift of capital going into China and Southeast Asian companies, just because of the fact that these countries, they have no problems anymore. And here in the West, you see each of the countries, one after the other, falling back into lockdown measurements, obviously with bad implications on the economy. So I do think if we look at the big tech in the US, frankly, that those companies have no exposure to China and the Southeast Asian markets. Take Google, take Facebook, they're blocked in China. Amazon has no business in China. Apple has only 20% market share in China. And at the same time, the big tech companies in China like Tencent, Alibaba, Baidu, and I would even count Meituan at some of those companies, they have a tiny fraction of the valuation of those US companies, but they are active in a market which is economically really successful right now. So I do think savvy investors will notice that and actually realign or reallocate the money in where it makes sense, where they see future gains, because as the West is kind of still scrambling in order to get the economy back on working, China can just take the money and double down on innovation, and we will see that reflected in the next couple of years in terms of growth and technology and innovation. So people have been asking if I know any China ETF that I invest in, and personally, just as I mentioned last week as well, I sold off my ETFs, for instance, that were the US daily ETFs, so exposed to the American economy there, because I'm getting less and less a fan of ETFs in general. I rather invest in companies that I truly understand, that have a great potential, even though they may be more volatile and risky. I personally can do that. Maybe for first time for beginners, it's not the right approach. ETFs are fine if you want to have more of a passive investment. But for me, this personally also means that I cannot tell you which China ETF to invest in. I have never taken a look at them. I personally don't own one. What I would personally probably do is look at the big tech, China, for instance, Tencent or Alibaba. Those two companies probably own the entire Chinese company in a way, with the services and products that they're offering, and also with the startup investments that they're doing. So these are kind of the innovation funds of China in a way. So you could just go ahead and invest in those companies, but this is not investment advice. I haven't looked into those companies, whether or not they are super cheaply valued, or what they are specifically doing. I personally only own Tencent, and I also think, as outlined before, that I think Baidu is super undervalued. It's trading at around 50 billion US dollars. That doesn't make any sense in my point of view if you look at what they're working on. So these would be some companies to take a look at. So definitely take care out there next week. Don't trade risky. Don't trade with money that you don't have, and possibly consider where it makes sense to invest your money if you still have some cash at hand. Buying dips is always a good strategy. My point of view is I will be doing it as I have been outlined in my video, and also as I have been outlined more in my Patreon posts. So stay tuned for more updates on what this means next week. I have a couple of interesting announcements and more topics, more in-depth topics for NIO to cover. So stay tuned for that, and thank you guys for watching. Enjoy this Sunday.